OTB in 10, fantasy banter in 10 minutes or less or something. And we're back after a 1-week hiatus, scheduling quirks, which we'll get to in a different way in a few short minutes. But Garcia, let's start with the trade deadline. We haven't talked much about it. We've seen more trades this year than we had seen in the last few years combined. Trade deadline November 13th, so still a few weeks away. Which teams do you think you are looking at making moves, and what kind of moves do you foresee being made with the trade deadline fast approaching?
Yeah, what I'm hearing in the rumor mill is that PTT is on the hunt to add to his roster. If you look at the schedule and you look just at what the league standings show, he's really just one game behind good old Cleveland Nasty wristbands. So he is essentially one or two players behind and overtaking Cleveland Nasty. And I think he's got one asset that could bring him huge dividends when it's all said and done, and that's in Michael Thomas, who has yet to really play much of NFL season so far. So I think PTT's got to look at his roster, because outside of really what he has left, he's got to make a move if he thinks he can overtake that lead in the division. Even Cleveland Nasty. I mean, in Sweet Home Chicago, Weaverman, myself, regulators, we've all been on the move. Yourself, and all aboard the baby bus. He's got to be wondering, does he make a move or does he stand pat? And if you stand pat and you think you've got it, we've got 6 weeks left in the season. You don't want to be sitting there all of a sudden thinking to yourself, boy, I wish I made a move here and there. So I think PTT's the first guy that's got to really take a long look at his roster and think, is he going to keep Michael Thomas, or is he going to try to find a way to find a suitor out there such as yourself? You love receivers who could possibly, exchange for maybe a 1 for 2 or a 1 for 1. I don't know if you can find equal value right now for Michael Thomas, even though he's a first-round pick. I mean, Devin Singletary might be a great asset for PTT to kind of add to that running back situation. Another thing for Cleveland Nasty, I think he has Ezekiel Elliott, if I remember correctly. That Cowboys team does not look very strong. I don't know if you want to hold on to Elliott and want to kind of dangle him as an opportunity to sell him, I guess, high, so to speak.
So you're PTT right now. You got Michael Thomas. You've been sitting on Michael Thomas for, unfortunately, basically the entire season. Played week 1. I think that was it. Is this that moment? Is that what you're saying? Is this the moment where you try to convert him? And if you're PTT, how are you converting him? Are you looking at some running back depth, which I think he sorely needs? Or are you looking at 1-to-1 for receivers? I mean, obviously, I think you have to target a team that is in a different position, right? A team that maybe has a couple of fouls to give, so to speak. A team that can wait on Michael Thomas, whether because he comes back from injury or gets traded or makes amends with the Saints. It's a tough trade, because I think you have to find the right partner almost, which is almost as important as finding the right player, is it not?
I think you should knock on Shipman's door to see if there's a way to make a trade there, because I think Shipman's got some depth in that roster on running backs. So to your point, you definitely need some running back depth. I don't have anything left. I've given my entire team away, so I can't partake there. But again, you might be a good suitor for him, so you might want to give him a call after the show.
The other one that to me, thank you for that. The other one to me that is interesting is your shipwreck here, and you're sitting on Clyde Edwards-Helaire and Le'Veon Bell. We don't know what that running back split will look like week to week. What we know right now is that the Kansas City Chiefs offense, as high-powered as it is, has not looked like it can sustain 2 running backs, based on the other skill players and based on how much they throw the ball relative to their rushing efficiency. The question then becomes, if you're Ship, in a deep league like OTB, it's not crazy to have those 2 running backs, at least for depth, if not to start maybe one in your flex 3. Or are you looking at converting one, if only for the fact that you, raise your ceiling a little bit by getting rid of one of those players, right? Because if this works out, I don't see a situation where Clyde and Le'Veon can both have big days. There's just too many weapons, right? It's not like the Cleveland Browns, where even though they have OBJ and Landry, for whatever reason, the receivers haven't really worked out, and Hunt and Chubb would have big days at the expense of the receivers. It's tough for me to envision a world where Bell and Clyde both have big days. Your thoughts on that?
I think Le'Veon Bell going to the Chiefs was one of the worst things for him. As a fantasy note or two, it's going to be one of the least favorable spots. I think the Bears would have been better for him, or even the Steelers, although I know they've got themselves a running back carousel as well. But yeah, to your point, it's going to be a challenge. But again, injuries happen, as we know, and I think the Chiefs were looking more from a longevity standpoint to make sure that they've got themselves a solid backup plan as opposed to Darrell Williams. So they have threats in the world. They couldn't you down the road, looking at pass catching opportunities as opposed to Tyreek Hill, which would make me happy.
Thank you for throwing that in there. Let's move to scheduling quirks. And by scheduling quirks in this context, we mean remaining schedules for OTB clubs. Now, of course, we play everybody in this league plays everybody. Now, some teams play two teams differently than other two teams. Teams that you think maybe would be one way to start a season, now with 6 weeks to go, may look differently on your schedule. Garcia, as you look at the remaining 6 weeks, what stands out to you regarding scheduling favorability or perhaps unfavorability as teams look to make the playoff push?
Well, I think of all the teams that has a favorable schedule, your team seems to have the most favorable schedule. Week 13, you face me. My team's putrid, so that's a win for you right there. I think you've got PTT, you've got Cincinnati still on the line. I think you've got most of the teams on the lower tier of overall league standings. So you're sitting pretty well, and you're making a move, which I said about 3 weeks ago that you were back, and I predicted correctly that you're back. So now you're sitting at 3-5,
3-4, 3-4.
This week you'll be 4-5, and then you'll be 5-5, and then 6-5, and then 7-5, and 8-5.
So much is wrong.
I think you'll be in the playoffs. If you don't make the playoffs, I think it's just a huge travesty. One wonders, again, the scheduling making process of how this works and how you figured a way to have what I would say is not a soft schedule, but certainly one that is incredibly favorable. As to where I have to face you again and then Sweet Home Chicago again, which makes it really incredibly difficult. But, it is what it is. We play who's in front of us. In my case, I never win. So, but in your instance, you're going to have a run like no other, and you're going to sweep from here on out.
Okay, well, a few things there. It is interesting as you look at the way schedules line up towards the end of the season, how it could make a difference. A team like me that is basically dependent on win-loss record at this point, at least looks at a schedule that is more favorable than, say, a Shipwreck, which I got to put this up on the screen because Shipwreck's schedule is remarkable over the last 6 weeks of the season. And it's funny because the days where you would see wristbands on your schedule 2 times to end your last 6 weeks, those were good days for the first 6-7 years. They're not good days anymore. And look at this. 5 of the last 6 teams that Ship plays, top 6 in total points. Now, Ship's in an interesting place. We'll get there. That he still has an opportunity to make it in on win as well as on record. So just because you lose a bunch of games doesn't mean you'll necessarily be out of it. Also, of course, I don't think anybody wants to hear complaints about scheduling unfavorability more than the Waverman, who is remarkably 2-5, one of the league leaders in total points, and finds himself at 2-5. We'll get there in just a second as well. But if you're Shipwreck, you look at that is a daunting schedule. Next 3 weeks, you're playing 3 5-2 clubs. You're playing top 6 leaders in points in the next 5 weeks. That's tough. That's tough to make a run. Now, granted, week to week. Well, also one thing we haven't talked about, there are about to be a plethora of bye weeks. And so bye weeks are going to change the dynamics of a lineup, particularly in a deep league where you can't just go source compelling options on waivers to fill 2 or 3 spots week to week. So a lot of this could be much ado about nothing. We don't know yet. But if you look at the scheduling, there are 2 teams that stand out anyway. A team that might benefit from some favorability, a team that might not benefit from some scheduling favorability.
Well, I think what you should do is point and write down on a piece of paper how you're going to win every single week, and then post it on Facebook like another league.
Like regulators.
A few years ago.
Like regulators. Oh, man, I forgot about that. It didn't quite work out. I think it got the first week to work, and then we didn't hear much from regulators.
One of the better OTB moments.
Okay, all of this was a precursor to what is really the subject of this week and every week from here on out. It is trying to get you guys set for what is always a chaotic, dynamic, dramatic, complicated playoff picture. We're going to try to break it down for you right now. Garcia, do your best to play along. What I have on the screen first is your current playoff picture. Based on record, you'll see the teams in the hunt at the bottom, right? So your division leaders are Sweet Home Chicago, wristbands, an amazing game that we just saw, perhaps Super Bowl preview. Last week, Sweet Home Chicago was the winner, so they are the number 1 overall seed now based on both record and points being the tiebreaker there. Regulators, Gronk, TDs are your next 2 in on record. Waverman and Greatest Show on paper, let's put them aside for a second. Those are your next 2 in on points. Let's talk about record for a second. Gronk TDs is highlighted here because if you want to look at like softness right now for the teams in the hunt, a team to target, right now it's Gronk TDs because they're sitting there at 4-3. You've got Ship at 4-3, PTT at 4-3, and then you've got 3 other 3-4 clubs that are close. Every team on that list besides for Sidebar also is strong-ish in points, so it's not to say that they can't win tiebreakers if 2 teams are getting in with the same record. Now, let's switch to in the hunt based on points. Here you'll see that Greatest Show on Paper is the one that's most vulnerable, so to speak. So here's what's interesting. Waverman 2-5, Greatest Show on Paper 2-5. For the first time since we've implemented this playoff structure where 2 teams get in on points, we have 2 teams in the points race that are strong, but virtually reduced to almost no chance to make it in at this point based on record. It would be almost a sure thing that Waverman or Greatest Show on Paper would have to run the table to get in on record, and we know how tough that is for any team just based on scheduling quirks and who you end up on the other side of your screen week to week. This means that those 2 teams are kind of set right now where they're at, looking at the points race as their best route in. And if you look at it in the hunt based on points, Shipwreck, all aboard the baby bus, PTT, Cincinnati, all within 40 points of Greatest Show on Paper. So what's interesting about the points race is, okay, you don't really necessarily have to worry as much about winning games week to week, but when you're looking over your shoulder, you're looking over at about 4 teams. So I always find that to be the most tense thing about looking at getting in on points is every big play that happens on Sunday, it's not like, oh, Gronk TDs has that team, has that player that just had that 80-yard touchdown. I got to worry about that. No, there's a good chance that one of the 4 or 5 teams mentioned is having a big week somewhere that you have to keep your eye on based on points. So it's a little more anxious to have to do it, but that is the best route in probably for those 2 clubs. I will pause. Garcia, what stands out to you right now in what is a chaotic, as always, mid-season playoff race?
I have a very easy solution to solve all of our headaches when it comes to this playoff race. Moving forward, starting next year, we get away from these point totals, and the last 2 spots go to the highest point totals. And let's go back to a win and loss record, because really that's the nature of the game. It'll save us from the 10 to 15-minute monologue you just performed on this show and gets us back to what really is all about sports, and that's who has more wins, who has the least losses, instead of this nonsense and creating this hysteria, because it's no fun. I don't need to look over my shoulder because I have no one really chasing me because I'm out of the playoff picture.
Well, I'll tell you.
I feel for all the teams ahead of me. I really do, because this is just nonsense. I mean, Waverman, 8,000 points, it looks like, at a 2-5 record. He could lose out and still have the most points in the league and be in the playoff. Is that really fair to say you, who could have a better record with your 8 points that you've tallied over the last 3 weeks? So one has to wonder, are we doing this the right way, or are we doing this the wrong way? My guess it's going to be the latter, and I hope to see on the ballot next year that we completely do away with this point total thing, and we go wins-loss, or we just let everybody in the playoff picture, and we figure out a way to give the top team some money, and then we have kind of like a college tournament style where we kind of have like a March Madness. That's another option too. But
I love this. I love that.
It's overkill with this. He's got 3 more points than this other team, but then there's this team with a 4-3 record who can get in. It's like, no. Wins, losses.
Let me tell you.
Wins, losses.
No, it's not. I love the flip-flop nature because
now it's not, because you somehow figured out a way to convince people that this point total thing works.
Of course it works. Because look, here is the thing. It is ridiculous. A travesty. If the Waverman and Greatest Show on Paper were virtually out of it because of their record, when they are the two of the top 6 teams strongest in points.
It's not a travesty, because it's the name of the game is you win more than you lose.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not.
Then we go all 2 point totals, and records are out. Then we don't even keep record.
Here's the thing.
Then your record is thrown out the window. We don't keep records anymore. Okay. So you can't have your banners of I beat Paul's team by no, it's all done and over with.
No
more records. We just keep point totals.
Okay.
It's rotisserie league.
Okay, listen. Is the rotisserie format the fairest? Yes. Now, here's the thing: is that it needs to be a balance between entertainment.
You would be in last place.
Yes, I would. I basically am, and that is true.
You had 48 points 2 weeks ago. 4-8.
Can I defend the format? Can I defend the format?
If you switch the numbers around.
Okay, I'm going to defend the format in a second. Here is the situation.
I'm not going to defend it.
We are based in sport. Our brains are based in sport. We're based in this idea that sport is a zero-sum game and that every contest has a winner and a loser. That works when you have control to some semblance of the team that is on the other side of the screen from you. But you cannot play defense against who you're arbitrarily assigned to week. It is ridiculous to keep win-loss records, period. You're right about that. A rotisserie league would in fact be the fairest format. Because let me tell you what is the clearest and only indication of how good your team is. Total points. That is it. Your record is completely meaningless. But here's the thing. This is also about entertainment. This is also a game in which we're playing because we like to feel like we've got something else involved in a football season on our Thursdays, Sundays, Mondays, and this year Tuesdays. And for that reason, it's fun week to week to have something to win, to have something to lose, to have rivalries with certain teams, to have multiple options in on a playoff picture, to be sitting there 200 points down in the playoff race, but because you have a decent enough record, the season's not over. We go through this year to year. There is no such thing as a perfect format. The fairest format is rotisserie. The most entertaining format is win-loss record. The hybrid of both of them makes it so that we have a piece of entertainment and a piece of fairness. Because it would be a travesty if Waverman, who has had basically the biggest week that each team has had against him this year, for him to not be in the playoff race right now with that team would be a complete joke. It is a complete joke to think that he and Greatest Show on Paper would be completely eliminated. You can't have that. That is where you have a trapdoor for points for teams that are getting screwed, which those two teams, particularly Waverman, are week to week.
All right, so I want you to write an article about this on Fantasy Pros and see how many tweets you get.
Already did. It didn't go well.
Oh, it didn't go well.
Because people, listen, I wrote.
It's funny how that's the one article you never really posted about or shared with me.
Well, I also there'll be
because I have 3 days to read something, but really, I mean. You're going off again this whole thing that the points totals and that's kind of the measure bar. But it's not, because there's an element of luck, there's an element of chance, there's an element of something going right and something going wrong. You have no control of. You put the best team out there. It's not Waverman's fault that he's not winning, although he's putting out the most points. It's your fault the way you put the schedule out for him.
I can't know for sure what the schedule is going to be before I start the year.
3 things on the ballot next year. One is it's going to be that Dynasty League, and it's going to pass. You wait and see. We're going to go back to a win-loss. You're going to wait and see. And then the third thing is we're going to create a whole B division where if you have 48 points during a season, you're kicked out.
All right, here's the thing. Because look, here is where I have equated this to. Suppose that you were to enter a job candidacy race, let's reverse it. Let's say you're the hiring manager, and you have 12 people you're going to hire for a certain job. You would obviously assess each on experience, on references, on how they handle the interview, body of work, whatever. But suppose you arbitrarily decided to pit them against each other. So candidate A that came in, you're going to put them in a little mini race against candidate B, and you're going to pick one to advance to the next stage. It doesn't matter if candidate A and candidate B were terrible, both, you have to pick one. Let's say candidate C and D come in, they're both amazing, but you still can only pick one. That's effectively what we're doing week to week when you pit these teams against each other. 2 teams could play together with the highest points total, 2 teams could play together with the lowest points total, but you're going to award one a victory, which is ridiculous. In an interview process, you will take the 6 best teams. In a fantasy football process, which has more to do with what I just described than professional football. The problem is that we are equating professional football with fantasy football when fantasy football has nothing to do with professional football, and therefore, points makes more sense. It's fairer. However, entertainment makes it, because that's also a big reason we play, entertainment makes it so that win-loss records are also necessary in this imperfect game.
Let's go back to the start of the conversation that you just had with yourself. And that is, when it comes to hiring, you're not so much pitting them against each other. You're pitting against who's going to want more money. You always hire the person who asks for less.
And because you've wanted to bring it out and I've diverted it very well, look, the 48-point week is an interesting situation. I will give you that. So
I don't think interesting is a way to describe it.
Well,
I think that it's laughable. It's going to be one that we will always hold over your head.
Look,
I mean, how did the team who was so perfect last year, a legendary team, they're the best in the world, put up 48 points? How does a franchise stand out and come out and even think that they're the best?
So I guess what I'm trying to say is, in a format that rewards total points, one just godly terrible week can kill you. Can absolutely kill you. And you could ask the question, is that fair? Let's say you're a team that's putting up 100 points every week and you have one complete dud. You get 4 players that are injured, you get 2 players that just completely underperform. should you have to chase that for the rest of the year? You could make a point, you could make an argument that you shouldn't have to chase that. However, I would disagree. I would say, again, the one thing we know is that total points makes all the difference. And unfortunately for you, bud, if you put up 48 points, I'm sorry, you had a bad week, you had a bunch of underperforming players, yeah, you're going to have to chase that for the rest of the year now. It's very tough to dig your way out of that hole, but it's something that you're going to have to live with because you did it. As far as it is a reflection of decision-making, I'd like to point you to a team that started 4 Philadelphia Eagles last week in a lineup that was, I'm sorry, objectively, it was a terrible decision. And I don't care that it worked out for him. I am saying that that is objectively a bad decision. And I'm not, impugning all aboard the baby bus. He felt like he was backed in a hole. He played a daily fantasy format. I'm saying, kids, if you're watching at home, if you want to talk about things you shouldn't do, that is an example of something that you should never do and that should not have worked out. 1 in 100 times, you're going to limp into a pot out of position at 2-5 off suit. It's going to work out for you. That doesn't mean you should write a book on all the ways that you should limp into pots with 2-5 off suit, because it's not usually going to work out. Now, that said, we've all made objectively bad decisions. Again, I'm trying to say that all aboard the baby bus, is this terrible person for making a decision to start 4 Eagles and having it work out. My point is that this is an arbitrary game. That decision could have easily left all aboard the baby bus with 36 points. It left him with 120 points at the end of the week, 45 points total from those 4 players.
So one, I've got on the screen behind me the final score. By the way, I didn't even realize Ronald Jones 2 weeks ago had 25 points after I traded him. So congratulations, Brian. You won the deal on that one. But to your point about all aboard the baby bus, I think he actually made a very shrewd strategy there because, shake your head no.
He didn't.
Simply because of the fact that you're playing the New York Giants, who are a putrid.
Who are actually a middle-of-the-pack to better defense. So that point is not true. They're not the Jets.
Okay, well, they're not the top, right?
They're not the top.
Because if they were the best defense, I'd be like, well, he's lost his marbles and he's just a homer and he's picking every Eagle he can. And
you were 1 for 2 in that assessment. You were 1 for 2 in that assessment. Because I will say this. All aboard the baby, and look, and again, this is not an impugnment of all aboard the baby bus. Can I make one statement?
Up in the batting title.
All aboard the baby bus does not do that if it's not the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's not an impugnment of homerism. We're all doing things that are homerism. I'm saying all aboard the baby bus doesn't do that if it's not Philadelphia Eagles because he's not intimately aware of any other team.
I mean, the epitome, I guess the way to really kind of just summarize your season is Daniel Jones falling flat on his face in that breakaway run, because that's what happened to you so far this season. But somehow people let you back in, and I'm not going to name names, Carl and Ian, they let you back in, and now you're running 6 weeks straight wins, and we're going to listen to you about how great you are.
No, we're not.
I'm going to have to deal with this. Well, I'm 2-11, trying to fight for a consolation bracket and finally have a first-round pick in the top 4.
And that's it. Now, I think that's what we got this week. Garcia, closing thoughts as we jump back in to a remarkably wild, very exciting Week 8.
I just hope there's more trades before November 13th to, make this even more interesting. And I think we have to recognize the fact that Cleveland Nasty truly is on an epic run. And we need to take notice of the fact that he may be crowned his first ever championship when it's all said and done. So, but don't look too far ahead because you're right on his tail as his PTT, and I'm hoping for guys like Carl and Gronk and those guys to make even a deeper run. So I'm out of it. So I'm just gonna watch the show, and I'm just gonna every now and then make sure I set up my lineup. But, 2 and 5. I have more points than you right now, but that's going to probably change after this week when I put up 6 points and you put up 600. Somehow magically we went from a half PPR to 3-point PPR, and your team does far better than everyone else. So
I will.
There's nothing really much to add other than the fact that you're king, and I enjoy to have the driver's seat and watching you.
Now I'll tell you this: Super Bowl preview, Super Bowl prediction, I guess I should say right now. I'm saying Sweet Home Chicago versus wristbands. That's my Super Bowl prediction right now. Do you
That's
agree?
really going on a limb, taking the two top teams.
Well, I'm just saying. Well, but I'm saying a lot can change, and I know it's not exactly going on a limb to say that those two teams will be there at the end. I just believe.
I'll say this. I'm going to say it's going to be the greatest show on paper.
Wow.
And Cleveland nasty. I don't know how that's going to work in the playoff structure.
No, it can. Yeah, it can, because the way that the playoff structure works, as long as
because we don't have a normal playoff structure, because you allow two teams with point totals in. I mean, one would say, well, that's not going to happen because the greatest show on paper's got to run the table, but you, of course, somehow convince people that point totals is better.
Look, pretty soon, like by next week or the week after, I'm going to be completely out of the race as well, and then you, I think, will feel different about it.
Here we go.
You'll feel differently about it.
Bill Belichickian way.
Okay. Well,
we're on to Cincinnati.
Well said. He is Garcia out on the West Coast, Sidebar out on the East Coast. Remember, trade deadline is now, I believe, about 2 weeks away.
You probably should double check that.
November 3rd. No, I was trying to do math in my head. It was November 13th. I just can't remember exactly.
Well, that's the problem. You're doing math in your head, which leads to all these issues.
Probably the entire playoff picture is inaccurate based on that. Happy waiver wiring, and best of luck to the teams that are in trade conversations this week and beyond. We'll see you next week. OTB and 10.